Okay, in today's video, I'm going to show you on how are we going to update or delete a record in a MySQL database through our API and Flutter. Okay, so we are done with on how are we going to add and how are we going to retrieve a record from our database. So today, in this video, I'm going to show you on the update, and later on, the next video, I'm going to show you on how are we going to perform our delete operation. Okay, so what are we going to do is we are going to add some buttons here for the edit or the update and delete, but that would be after we are going to have our uh, API first. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you on how are we going to perform an update operation into our API. Okay, so I'm going to create here a function named update. Okay, then we are going to have the connection, then for our JSON, then for our update statement. Okay, so these are SQL statement for our update. So update, then set the contact name is equal to name, email, phone. So basically all of the columns into our TBL contacts, okay, except for the user ID. Okay, so I'm not going to change anymore the user ID since we are very sure that the one editing this contact would be the owner of the contact, okay, or the user who owns this contact. Okay, so as you can see here, we are updating these fields of the contact ID, which is the contact ID to be edited. Okay, so it is a constraint here that determines which record are we going to update, because if we are going to remove the where statement here, it is going to update all contacts. Okay, so do not forget to always include our constraint in our update. Okay, so we have here our parameters: name, email, phone, address, and group ID. Okay, so the next is we are going to bind our parameters. Okay, so we are going to expect the variables or parameters from our client to have ID, name, email, phone, address, and group ID. Okay, so these JSON values here are actually coming from our client, in which we are going to define later on. Okay, so after we have bind the different parameters, and after, by the way, preparing our SQL statement for our prepared statement, next is we're going to have our execute, and to determine if ever something has been updated. So we are going to determine if an affected, or if there are records that are affected with the latest execute statement. Okay, so our execute statement here is we have an update, and if ever it has successfully updated a record, so the row count would be greater than 0. Okay, so if ever greater than 0, meaning that is successful, so we're going to return 1, else we're going to return 0. Okay, then last is we're going to return our the return value, echo, or we're just going to have here return. Return, because into our switch statement here, so we have here our update, so we already have here our echo. Okay, so I have here case update, then it is going to call the update function that we have just defined, then later on we're going to have our delete. Okay, so basically this is our function for update. Okay, it is going to update all fields based on the contact ID. So take note that the contact ID is our primary key. Okay, so have it here. This is our contact ID, which is our primary key. Okay, so we have now defined our contacts.php. Okay, or our API endpoint. Okay, so next is we're going to have our client. Okay, so instead that I'm going to have the arrow here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this with a row. Then a row would contain two buttons for the update and delete. Okay, so I'm going to define it here. So instead that we're going to have for the trailing is we're going to have our icon, okay, the arrow right icon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create here a row. Okay. Oops. Okay, a row which says children. Okay, and in our children we're going to have two buttons. I'm going to use here icon buttons. Okay, so icon button, then we have here our on pressed, then we have our icon. Okay, icon widget with icons that I'm going to have edit. Okay, I'm going to maximize pen, or actually I have here a note. Okay, edit note. Then next is I'm going to have also our for our delete. Okay, that delete. Okay, so I have now defined here my two buttons. So we are going to save and reload. Let's try. Oops. Row, it must be comma. Save and reload. Oops, there we go again. Okay, so it has something to do again with the size. Okay, so the same mistake with the previous video. So one way to do this one is actually to have to set the exact width or size of the row. Okay, so what I'm going to use is main axis size dot min. Okay, because maximize, it is going to maximize the amount of free space, or actually it is going to it is going to occupy the whole row. Okay, the whole width of the column. So therefore we're not going to use our max, but we are just going to use our min, because min is going to use only the amount of free space, or whatever is the space left. Okay, that is going to be used by our min. So I'm just going to use our minimum. Okay, so save and reload. Okay, so we have now our two buttons. So we have here for our update, and next is we're going to have our delete. Okay, so we're going to have, in this video, we're just going to concentrate on the update. Okay, so here I'm going to create the update. First is we're going to show our dialog box for the update. Okay, so I'm just going to have, okay, I'm just going to have it below. Okay, so we're going to have a void show update form, and we are going to accept as a parameter the index of the record to be updated from or later on from our contacts list. Okay, so therefore here to call uh, the show update form is we're going to have it here show update form, and we are going to pass the index. Okay, so as you can see, we're using here the index. Index means the current record. Okay, so that's the show update form. Then into our update form, what I'm going to show you is I'm just going to create an alert dialog box. Okay, so I have here my, where is it? Okay, in my public functions, I have here my show dialog, so I'm just going to copy the show dialog here. Okay, then I'm just going to paste into my main. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show, oops, it must be here. Okay, I'm just going to have the show dialog. Okay, so into my title, I'm going to have update. Okay, just update. And for the content, we are going to display here the body of our dialog. Okay, so instead that I'm just going to use the normal text field, I'm going to show you now how are we going to create text form field. Okay, so if you're still familiar with the form in your HTML, okay, so we are going to use that here into our into this code. Actually, it is not only for update but also with your let us say with your registration or your previous codes, okay, for registration, then add contacts and so on. Okay, because if ever we're going to use here a form, we could use the validate or the validator function of the form. Okay, so how are we going to use here a form? So first is we are going to create, okay, I'm just going to have it here. Okay, so I'm going to create here a form. Okay, I'm just going to have it as final, then we're going to call it form key. Okay, so what's the purpose of the form key? Global key, the form state. Oops. Okay, so what I'm creating here is actually, if ever that you are still familiar with your JavaScript, or no, your HTML, so this is the form, then ID is equal to form key, and so on. Okay, this is for our HTML. So that is actually what I'm doing now. I'm creating here a form, okay, in which we are creating a key for a unique key for our form, because it is possible that here you could create another form in your other function, so that Flutter would know which form is it dealing with. So therefore we're going to create a form key. Okay, so it is a unique key for this form. Okay, so that instead that we are going to have our text field, okay, so we are going to use our form key, no, text form fields. Okay, so with it, I'm going to have the topmost would be a column, okay. So again, in my column, I'm not going to use the whole column, but I'm going to create here main, wait, context return alert dialog, later on. I'm going to decode this later on. Okay, so column main axis size. We're going to use again the size. Oh. Main axis size, we're going to have the main axis size that mean. Okay, so for the children, so instead that I'm going to have, so first is we're going to have here our name. So instead that we are going to have the text field, are used with the text field, I'm going to use text form field. Okay, so what's with our text field? So first is we're going to have, okay, I'm going to have here our decoration. So my decoration is input decoration, input decoration, then just to have the label text, contact name. Okay, so in your case later you could add some more decoration, but as of now I'm just going to limit it with the label text. Okay, then we are going to have our, okay, this is the advantage of text form field compared with our what's this, with our text field. Okay, so we have here now our validator. Okay, so for our validator, it is going to return here actually a value. Okay, the value of this text form field. Okay, so that we could validate, let us say, the validation for the contact name, it should not be empty. Okay, so that's why we are going to validate here if value is equal to null or the value that is empty. Okay, so it says if the user didn't input anything on this field, so it should return, let us say, please enter contact name. Okay, so else, so therefore if ever it is not null or empty, then we're going to return null. So if ever the validator returns null, so therefore the value inputted by the user is valid. Okay, oh, I have one red, so I think I'm going to have it here. Okay, okay, so this is now for our text field. Okay, but the problem here is we don't have defined yet our form, by the way. Okay, so that is why here I'm going to wrap my column with a form, because all of the text form field, so that the validator is going to function, it should be wrapped within a form. Okay, and we are going to define, take note, we have defined here our form key. So inside our form, I'm going to have here the parameter, we have the key, it is form key. Okay, the one that we have defined in line 244. Okay, so I have now here my validator. Okay, and later on, when the form is going to submitted or is going to be saved, so we are going to define our on save. Okay, so on save, it is going to return the value, then we are going to work with the value. Okay? So take note here that we are not working now with the text controller. Although we could still have the controller. No, it's not in the column. It's on the text form field. Okay, so as you can see, we still have our controller. But I'm not going to use here our controller. How are we going to use our text form field without a controller? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define string name. Okay, I'm going to define it first with the blank value or empty string. Okay, so name would be our variable for the first field, text form field. Okay, so that's like here on the onSave, we're going to have name is equal to value. Okay, so we have here a problem. Okay, so we're just going to assert that the value is not null. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to define first a single form field. Then I'm going to show you how it is going to work. Okay, so next is going to have here a size box. Okay, just for the spacer. Height would be 10.0. Then because here I'm going to have the elevated button. Okay, on press, and the child would be a text that says update. I guess it's better if ever I'm going to have the update here. Update, then the other button would be close or cancel. Okay, so I'm just going to remove my elevated button there. Save. Okay, so as you can see, I have defined a single text form field for the name. Then I have here my the text button with the update text that is going to perform the update when it is going to be pressed. But I'm going to see it first. How does it look? Okay, we have Pitok 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Click. Okay, so we have here our update, then we have here our contact name and our update button. Okay, so next is how are we going to work with our validator? Okay, by the way, but before that, if ever we are going to do an update, so I click on Bongbong Marcos. So therefore, what I want is that I want the name of Bongbong to be displayed in this field. Or if ever I'm going to click on Pablo Pindoco, so it is going to display here the name of Pablo Pindoco. Okay, so that is why here into our name, so we are going to have the contacts list. Then take note, this is our list that we have defined above. Okay, then I'm going to have that name. Okay, so again, so I'm just going to have an assertion here that the name uh, is not null. Okay, so by default the name should have a value. Okay, the name of the record that we want to edit. Okay, so I want to display it here. So how are we going to display into our text form field? So we have here the value or the initial value. Okay, for the initial value I'm going to have the variable name. Okay, so that when it is going to open, so by default it contains the name of the selected contact. Okay, then later on when the user is going to click on the update button, so I'm just not going to have I'm not going to pop it yet, but I'm just going to save this one. Okay, so I'm going to call the save. So if we are going to validate if form key. Okay, so we're going to work with our form. If form that current state okay, that validate of form key, it should be capital. Again, we are going to assert. Okay, so if ever validate means okay, validates every form field that is descendant of this form. So take note, the only descendant of our form now is we have our text form field, and the validate function is going to validate, okay, if there are no errors. And what are the errors? Based on the validation that we have here. The only validation that I have is if it is not null or it is empty. Okay, so if ever it is not, or if ever it has no errors, then that's the time that we're going to save. Okay, so form key that current state that save. Okay, okay, saves every form field that is descendant of this form. So it is then going to commit the value, whatever would be the value of, it is going to call then this one here. Okay, the save method here is going to call this function, so therefore the value of the text field would be assigned to the variable name. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here now is I'm just going to print the name. Okay, if ever we have edited our form field. By the way, I'm sorry for my voice. So after savings, I'm now going to reload. Okay, so I have a problem with my emulator, so I'm going to pause my video first. Okay. Okay, so we're back. So ptalk 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so let us say I'm going to edit Bongbong Marcos Jr. Then I'm going to leave the name blank. Okay, so when I click on update, so as you can see, it says please enter contact name. Why? Because once it validated, so it is going to call the validate function, okay, and it validated is empty, and as you can see, since it is empty, so therefore it's going to return please enter contact name. So therefore there was an error, and save, this one here would not be executed, the save here, okay. But let's say Control Z, if ever I'm going to have Bongbong Marcos Senior, okay, update, so it is now valid, and you can see here now, okay, I have printed here the name, okay. So therefore this one here has been executed, okay. So that's the advantage of a text form field compared with the ordinary text field, okay. So next is we are going to have our other values, okay, for the name, okay, we have the phone. I'm just going to copy all of them, then I'm going to paste it here, okay. So we have the phone, email address, the group ID, the ID, and the user ID, because later on I included also the user ID here because we are going to use later on our contact, which is it requires here the user ID. Although we are not going to use the user ID into our API, but still I have it initialized in our contacts list because again, because of our contact constructor, okay. Then next is we are going to have our, okay, name, phone, email, address, okay. I copied and pasted them, so we have here our phone number, we have our phone, please enter contact number, okay. Again, this is phone, okay. So next is we have our email, the email address, the initial value would be email, then please enter email address, and here we have email. Then the last is we're going to have our home address, okay. So all of the fields we have it here, the variables are actually defined here. So later on I'm going to have the ID and the user ID, okay. So save and reload. Okay, we have Donald Trump. So you could see here Donald Trump, the number, email, and the home address, okay. So cancel. So if ever we have Sarah, then we have here our the different values for the different fields for the contact Sarah Duterte. So if ever, again, if ever I'm going to have the phone number to be blank, update, so you have there the phone number. And by the way, it is not always for the value. For, let us say, else if the value that length, let us say the length, it's not equal to 11. Okay, let us say we're just going to have this a very simple validation. So return phone number must be 11 digits. Okay, so for the phone number, we have here two validations. Okay, it should not be empty, and it should be 11. Actually, this is not useless. Okay, but okay, we are just going to leave it as it is. Okay, so save, reload. Okay, boom boom. So I'm going to have the number 0966. Okay, then I click on update. So as you can see there, it says phone number must be 11. Okay, so it passed the first validation, then the next validation it should be 11. Okay, so the only thing that we don't have now is our group. Okay, so we must have to validate also our group. Okay, so I'm just going to copy my drop down button. Okay, so we have here get groups. No. Okay, I'm going to copy the drop down button. I'm not going to call for this one. It is because this one here, the groups drop down button is responsible for updating the UI for the list view. Okay, whereas in our case, we are not going to update here our list view. Okay, so we are going to have after the size box, so at the bottom I'm going to have my drop down button. Okay, drop down button, but then we're going to use form field. Okay, so that this drop down button belongs also to our form. Okay, then for the value, instead of trying to have the selected group ID, because selected group ID is for our list view, so we are going to have the group ID that is actually defined on top. So we have it here, the group ID. Okay, then for the on change, instead that I'm going to have the group ID, no, the selected group ID, I'm just going to have here the group. Oops, the group ID. Then there's no need for me to validate or to update the contacts list. By the way, this is now, it should be comma. Save. Okay, by the way, for the validator, so if ever the value, now let us say we are going to have a policy that all contacts must belong to a certain group. So therefore, if ever the value is 0, so therefore we are not going to we'll say we must have to throw an error. Okay, so I have here value or the new value. Okay, so if value is equal to 0, okay, that's our validation, then we are going to return you must assign this contact to a group. Then else return null. Null meaning there are no errors. Okay, so nothing new here except for we are not using our drop down button, but it is form field. It belongs now to our form and it has a validator. So save and reload. Okay. Bong Bong is enemies. How about Donald Trump? It is colleague. So let us say it is correct. So enemies. So we have Bong Bong. Okay, and Pitok B. All groups. Okay, so we could now change here actually our here. So no, it shouldn't. It should. All groups must not be here. Anyway, when we update it, it is going to return an error. Okay. Okay, so next is we are now going to save our contact. Okay, the updated contact. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the update here. Int. Okay, we're going to have an int because we are going to return a value if it is successful or not. Okay, so I'm going to have here a contact. Okay, later on we're going to have our return. So I'm just going to copy and paste my first that. Okay, so I'm going to copy my save. So copy. Then here I'm going to have oops. Okay, so that it would be easier. So I'm just going to copy this, copy. Then we're going to have paste. Okay. So since we're going to use an await here, so therefore we're going to have an async. Okay, and int, if ever we're using here an asynchronous function, so therefore this must be a future. Okay, and with our update it should return something. Body, it must return something, so therefore we're going to have instead that I'm going to have the conditions here. Okay, so I'm just going to have return no, since it is either 1 or 0, so I'm just going to have a return response dot body. Okay, string and int. Okay, so I'm just going to have int dot parse then the body. Okay, so no, it's not users, but should be contact. Is it contact or contacts? It's contacts. Okay, so since we are going to have our contact here, so therefore our JSON data should be converted into a JSON. So therefore I'm going to use here our contact. Okay, that to JSON. No, I have created here, by the way, to JSON 2, because the to JSON is we have only the user ID and the group ID. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to create another method. I'm just going to mark it second. The second to JSON is going to convert all of the fields to JSON. Okay, so I think we use this one here into our search. If I'm not mistaken, this is for our search, maybe, I think. No, for our filter. Okay, we use this one for our filter. So we are going to use all of these to convert the current contact into a JSON. I'm just going to have the suffix to here. So here I'm going to have to JSON 2. Okay. So it's up to you if ever this will be your to JSON and the other one would be to JSON 2. So it's up for you to decide. Okay. So contact, then it converted into JSON, then we are going to have our operation would be our update. And by the way, I'm still going to use our post, although we could we should be using here update, but anyway, I'm just still going to use post because it is the same. It is going to return or send the content of the contact. Okay, so how are we going to call the update? So it is on the button. Where is it? Okay, so we have here. So instead that I'm going to save, no, instead I'm going to print, I'm going to create here a contact. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to create here a contact object that is going to be sent into our update. Okay, so contact, then we have the different fields here. So first is we're going to have our name. So our name is from our name. Okay, so don't be confused with the two. The first is our name parameter, and the next is the variable that we have defined above. Okay, the string variable that we have defined into this function or method. Okay, so next is we have our phone. So we have phone, comma. Then we have our email. Group ID. Group ID. Then we have our user ID, then the address, and the last is for the primary key, which is our ID. Oops. Okay, so we have now defined our contact. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to call the update, sending then our contact. Okay, so contact, then we have here our contact, undefined name contact. That should be here. Okay, update, then contact. This is outside the if. Okay, because we have defined the contact within our if statement, so therefore it could not recognize the contact here because it is now outside our if. Okay, so this is how are we going to call our update. But take note that update returns an integer. Okay, so therefore here we are going to validate if contact is equal to 1. uh, the operand int isn't a subtype or subtype supertype of the left operand, which is a future. Okay, so yes, update is a future. Okay, our update here is a future int while we are comparing it with an integer. So therefore, since it is a future, it is not going to wait for the if statement here is not going to wait for the return value for the contact, and it will going to go directly with the commands here. And if ever we are going to have here or else, the result of this structure would always be else. Why? Because update will never be 1. It will always be null. Why? Because it is going to wait, it could not wait for the return value here. So therefore, so that it's going to wait for the value, and since this is a future, so we're going to have the keyword await. Okay, but the await, we could not use the await if this function is not an asynchronous. So therefore, we are going to have this function as asynchronous. Okay, so if ever it is 1, so therefore it is, why it is 1? It is because we are validating here if ever it is successful, meaning greater than 0, it is going to return 1, else 0. So that is why here we're validating is the return value 1, and that is actually our response dot body. The one that is being returned here, the one that is going to be returned here is actually the body. Okay, and it is returned to the calling class, which is our here. Okay, so if ever it is 1, meaning correct, so we are I'm just going to close navigator. I'm going to pop the current context, or actually our, okay, the alert dialog would be closed. Okay, then I'm going to update the content of the list view. Okay, so that we could update the content of the list view, so we are going to here the contacts list view. So we have here the trigger for the rebuild would be the length of the contacts list. So what are we going to do is we are just going to update the contacts list elements or values. Okay, contacts list is equal to get contacts. Okay, it must be await. Okay, so after it is updated, then we are going to issue here a blank set state. Okay, then later on I'm going to have a show. Okay, so we have our show message box. By the way, our show message box is defined into our public functions. Okay, this is just going to display a title and whatever would be the message. Okay, show message box, the context, then we have the title. I'm just going to have success. Then for the context, the content, okay, we're going to have record successfully updated. Else, I'm just going to display update failed. I'm just going to have not updated. I guess that's it. So we're going to try. So reload. There we go again. So this error here, by the way, is not it's not related to our code, but it is with our emulator. I guess it is going to close later on. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Login. Okay, let us say Bongbong Marcos. I'm just going to change the Bongbong Marcos to senior and 0919123123 and I'm going to change the enemies to classmates. Okay, let's try update. So record successfully updated. Okay, so as you can see, Bongbong Marcos senior, and we have also the number has been changed. And if ever we're going to, was it a classmate? Okay, so we have here classmates is now we have Bongbong. Okay, all groups. I'm going to have Donald. Then I'm going to assign also Donald to my classmate. Okay, then update success. Okay, so we have now Bongbong and Donald as my classmate. Why? Because I have edited all Bongbong and Donald to be my classmate. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to have the next video for the delete. So what we have done so far, okay, as a recap, is first is we have here, okay, we have changed the trailing. Okay, instead that we had a right arrow, so we have the row. Then we have set the main axis size to the mean, so that it's going to occupy only those space that has been left for the trailing. Then we have added two buttons. We have the update and the delete button. Okay, so if ever we click on update, so it is going to display the form. Okay, and the form is we have, so first is we have generated here our form key. Okay, then the variables for each of the columns. Then we used an alert dialog. Okay, an alert dialog which contains the form. Okay, with the form key that we have defined. In the child of the form is we have a column, which the column then contains all of the text fields or the form fields, the text form field, and the drop down form field. Okay, and in our form field is what is new here is we have the validator. Okay, to validate it so that we are not going to send erroneous data into our API. Okay, on save for, we have now assigned our variable to the value, the new value to our variable. Then when we click on save, so it is going to validate. Then if ever it has been successfully validated, then save. Then we created here our contact to be used into our update. Okay, so when we click on update, by the way, when we call on update, we pass the new contact that we have created here with the values from our form fields. Okay, then to our update, so you have it here. So same, nothing has changed. Then as it, we have only here, we have just converted our contact. Take note, the data type for the contact is we have a contact. It is defined here in our contact. And since we are going to have, we must have to convert it into JSON. So therefore, we have created here a method within our contact class to JSON too. Okay, because we already have our to JSON that we used in our previous video. Actually, we could merge the two. Okay, but also I'm just going to have them separated. Okay, so JSON2 send, then it returns a value either 1 or 0, and if ever it is 1, so therefore success. We are just going to display success. Okay, we have updated our display, then success. Okay, so actually that's all. Nothing more. Okay, it's only those are the new things that we have added into our code. Okay, so that's all for our update, and I'll see you on the next video, in which we are going to discuss then how are we to delete a record from our database.